The letter trembled in Victoria Monroe's hands as she stood on the Philadelphia train platform, her sister Margaret gripping her arm hard enough to leave bruises beneath the fabric of her traveling dress. "You will die out there, Victoria," Margaret hissed, her face pale with fury and fear. "A woman alone, traveling to some God-forsaken Texas town to marry a stranger. You are throwing your life away, and for what? Pride." Victoria pulled her arm free, her green eyes blazing despite the tears threatening to spill. "For freedom, Margaret. Something you would not understand, married to your banker and living under father's thumb even now. Better father's protection than the mercy of some rough cowboy who probably cannot even read," Margaret shot back. "Mark my words, sister. You will regret this foolish decision before the year is out. When you come crawling back, do not expect us to welcome you with open arms." Those words echoed in Victoria's mind as the train pulled away from the station, carrying her southwest toward a future she could barely imagine. It was April 1878, and she was 22 years old, educated, stubborn, and entirely alone. The advertisement had been simple, almost stark in its honesty. "Rancher in Brownsville, Texas seeks educated wife, must be strong of character and willing to work. W. Patterson." She had responded on a whim, born of desperation after her father announced his intention to marry her off to his business partner, a man of 50 with wandering hands and a cruel mouth. The correspondence that followed surprised her. William Patterson wrote in a clear, educated hand. He was honest about the hardships of ranch life, about the isolation and the work. He made no flowery promises, offered no false romance. He needed a partner, he wrote, not a decoration. Something about that honesty called to her. In her final letter before boarding the train, she had accepted his proposal. Now, 5 days into her journey, the landscape outside her window had transformed from green hills to endless prairie, and finally, to the flat, harsh beauty of Texas. The other passengers eyed her with a mixture of pity and curiosity. A woman traveling alone was unusual enough, but one headed to Brownsville as a mail-order bride. The whispers followed her at every stop. When the train finally lurched to a halt at the small Brownsville station, Victoria's heart hammered so hard she feared it might burst through her corset. She gathered her 2 bags, everything she owned in the world, and stepped onto the platform into the blazing Texas heat. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she immediately felt sweat begin to form beneath her high-necked traveling dress. The platform was nearly empty save for a handful of men lounging near the station house. Victoria scanned their faces, trying to imagine which might be William Patterson. She had no photograph, only his descriptions in his letters. Tall, he had written, with dark hair and a scar along his jawline from a horse's kick. "Miss Monroe." She turned at the voice and found herself looking up at a man who matched the description, and yet exceeded it in ways she had not anticipated. William Patterson stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean, his skin bronzed from years under the Texas sun. Dark hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and yes, there was the scar, a thin white line along his strong jaw. But it was his eyes that caught her, a startling blue-gray that studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Mr. Patterson," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady. He removed his hat, revealing more of his face. He looked to be perhaps 27 or 28, his features weathered but handsome. "Welcome to Brownsville, madam. I hope the journey was not too difficult." "It was long," she admitted, "but I am here." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "That you are." He reached for her bags, and she noticed his hands were calloused, scarred from work. "The wagon is just over here. The ranch is about an hour's ride." As they walked toward a sturdy wagon hitched to two horses, Victoria noticed the stares from the men on the platform. One of them, a heavy-set man with a tobacco-stained beard, called out, "That your new bride, Patterson? She looks a bit delicate for ranch life. Give her a week before she is begging for the next train east." William's jaw tightened, but he did not respond. He helped Victoria onto the wagon seat with surprising gentleness, then climbed up beside her. As they pulled away from the station, he finally spoke. "You will hear talk like that. Folks here can be narrow-minded. If it bothers you, I understand." "My sister said much worse when I left Philadelphia," Victoria replied, watching the small town roll past. Brownsville was rough, dusty, a collection of wooden buildings that looked like a strong wind might blow them over. "She said I would regret coming west, that I was throwing my life away." William was quiet for a long moment, guiding the horses onto a rutted road that led out of town. "Will you regret it, I mean?" Victoria turned to look at him, this stranger she had agreed to marry. His profile was strong, honest somehow, and when he glanced at her, she saw something in his eyes that was not pity or judgment but genuine curiosity. "I do not know yet," she said honestly, "but I know I would have regretted staying." That almost smile appeared again. "Fair enough." They rode in silence for a while, and Victoria took in the landscape. The land stretched endlessly in all directions, covered in tough grass and scattered mesquite trees. The sky was bigger than anything she had ever seen, a vast blue dome broken only by a few wispy clouds. It was harsh and beautiful and utterly foreign. "Tell me about the ranch," she said finally, needing to fill the silence. "About 3,000 acres, William said. I run cattle mostly. Have a small herd of horses too. The house is simple, but it is solid. I built most of it myself. There is a creek that runs through the property, keeps the cattle watered. Nearest neighbor is the Rodriguez family, about 5 miles south." "How long have you been here?" 7 years. Came out from Missouri after the war." His voice tightened slightly on those last words, and Victoria did not press. Many men had scars from that conflict, visible and otherwise. "And you have been alone all that time?" "Had a foreman, Jack Cooper, but he moved on last year to start his own place." "Since then, yes. Alone." He glanced at her again. "That is why I needed a wife. Not just for the company, though that matters, but running a ranch alone is near impossible. I need someone who can handle the house, help with the livestock when needed, keep the books." My letters were honest about that. "They were," Victoria agreed. "I appreciated the honesty. Too many men would have painted a prettier picture." "No point in pretty pictures when the reality is hard work and long days," William said. "But it is a good life, Miss Monroe. Hard, but good. The land provides if you are willing to work for it." They crested a small rise, and William pointed ahead. "There. That is home." Victoria looked and saw a house nestled in a small valley where a line of trees marked the creek he had mentioned. The house was indeed simple, a single-story structure of wood with a covered porch. Nearby stood a barn, a corral, and several smaller outbuildings. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and she could see horses in the corral. As they drew closer, Victoria noticed details William's letters had not mentioned. Wildflowers grew around the house, not planted but cheerful nonetheless. The porch was swept clean and curtains hung in the windows. Someone had cared for this place, had made it more than just a shelter. William helped her down from the wagon, and they stood for a moment in the dooryard. "It is not much," he said, and for the first time she heard uncertainty in his voice. "It is more than I expected," Victoria said truthfully. "The house looked solid, well maintained. May I see inside?" He led her up the porch steps and opened the door. The interior was dim and cool after the bright heat outside. The main room served as kitchen and living area combined, with a stone fireplace on one wall and a simple kitchen setup on another. The furniture was rough but well made. Two doors led off the main room, presumably to bedrooms. "I have been using the back bedroom," William said, gesturing to one of the doors. "The front one is yours. I thought, given the circumstances, you would want your own space, until you are comfortable with arrangements." Victoria felt a rush of gratitude. She had wondered during the long journey what would be expected of her immediately upon arrival. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded, looking almost as uncomfortable as she felt. "I will bring your bags in. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. I figured we could talk over supper about arrangements." "Can I help prepare it?" Victoria asked. "I am a decent cook." "That would be welcome," William admitted. "My cooking is functional at best." They worked together in an awkward dance, William showing her where things were kept while Victoria assessed the supplies. She found flour, beans, some salt pork, dried peppers. Not much to work with, but she had expected as much. She set about making biscuits while William fried the salt pork and heated beans. As they worked, the awkwardness began to ease slightly. William explained the routine of the ranch, the work that needed doing each day. Victoria asked questions, practical ones about water sources and food storage and where he bought supplies. By the time they sat down to eat at the simple wooden table, something of the strangeness had worn off. "This is good," William said, biting into one of her biscuits. "Much better than my attempts. My mother insisted all her daughters learn to cook," Victoria said. "It was one of the few things she taught me that I am grateful for now." "You did not get along with your family," Victoria considered her answer carefully. "My father had very specific ideas about what a woman should be. Quiet, obedient, decorative. I was never very good at any of those things. And that is why you answered my advertisement, partly. He wanted to marry me to his business partner, a man I found repugnant. This seemed preferable to that fate." She met William's eyes across the table. "I should be honest with you, Mr. Patterson. I did not come here for love or romance. I came here for freedom, for a chance to build a life on my own terms. If that is not what you are looking for, tell me now, and I will take the next train back." William set down his fork, his expression serious. "I appreciate the honesty, Miss Monroe, and I will return it. I am not looking for some fairy tale romance either. I need a partner, someone strong enough to handle this life. If that grows into something more, well, that would be fine, but I am not expecting it." "Then we understand each other," Victoria said, feeling oddly relieved. "We do." William stood, gathering the dishes. "One more thing, though. Out here, formality is not practical. I would like to call you Victoria if you are agreeable, and I would prefer you call me Will." "Victoria is fine," she agreed, "and Will suits you better than William." That evening, after the dishes were washed and put away, Will showed Victoria the rest of the property. The barn was neat, the horses well cared for. He introduced her to each animal by name, and she noticed the gentle way he handled them. Whatever roughness the world had given him, it had not made him cruel. "Can you ride?" he asked as they walked back toward the house in the gathering dusk. "I learned as a girl, though it has been some time," Victoria admitted. "I imagine I am rusty. We will get you back in practice. You will need to ride to get around the property." He paused, looking out over the darkening land. "It is isolated here, Victoria. The Rodriguez family is good people, and Maria Rodriguez has been kind about sharing vegetables from her garden. But there are not many women nearby, and social life is limited. I want you to understand what you are getting into." "I am not afraid of isolation," Victoria said, and realized it was true. "I think I prefer it to the suffocating society I left behind." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the night sounds. Crickets chirped, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The stars were beginning to appear, more stars than Victoria had ever seen in her life, brilliant against the darkening sky. "I should turn in," Will said finally. "Dawn comes early and there is always work to be done. If you need anything during the night, just call out." "Thank you, Will, for everything, for being honest, for being kind." He looked at her with those intense blue-gray eyes, and Victoria saw something flicker in them. "Thank you for coming, Victoria, for taking the chance. I hope your sister is proven wrong." "So do I," she whispered. That first night, Victoria lay in the simple bed in her new room, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Texas night. The bed was comfortable enough, the sheets clean if worn. Through the window, she could see that impossible spray of stars. She thought of Margaret's angry face, her father's cold dismissal when she announced her plans. She thought of the life she had left behind, the suffocating expectations and limited futures. And she thought of Will, this stranger she had agreed to marry, who had greeted her without judgment and offered her space to breathe. It was not love, not yet, might never be. But it was respect, and that was more than she had ever received in Philadelphia. Victoria woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the smell of coffee. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses and emerged to find Will already up, fully dressed, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "Morning," he said, handing her one of the cups. "I hope the roosters did not startle you too much." "I have always been an early riser," Victoria said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "What needs doing today?" Will looked surprised. "You are not wasting time, are you? You said yourself, there is always work to be done," Victoria replied. "I might as well learn the routine." Over breakfast, eggs and more of her biscuits, Will laid out the day's work. He needed to ride out to check the cattle, repair some fence line that had been damaged. Victoria could familiarize herself with the house, take inventory of supplies, perhaps start a garden if she was inclined. "I would rather come with you," Victoria said. "See the property, learn what you do. The house can wait." Will studied her for a long moment. "It will be hot, dusty work. And we will be in the saddle for hours. Then I had better get used to it." Something shifted in Will's expression, a warmth she had not seen before. "All right then. But you will need different clothes. A dress is not practical for riding range." He disappeared into his room and emerged with an old shirt and a pair of work pants. "These were mine when I was younger, before I filled out. They might fit you well enough." Victoria took the clothes, feeling the worn softness of the fabric. "Turn around," she said, and Will obliged, facing the wall while she quickly changed. The pants were loose but serviceable with a belt, and the shirt hung on her but would do. She had never worn men's clothes before, and the freedom of movement was startling. "All right," she said, and Will turned back. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he did not comment beyond saying, "We will get you proper riding clothes when we go to town next. For now, that will work." They saddled 2 horses, Will giving Victoria a gentle mare named Sage. "She is steady," he said. "Good-natured. She will take care of you while you find your seat again." Victoria had not been entirely truthful about her riding skills. She had loved riding as a girl, before her father decided it was unladylike and forbade it. But the memory was there in her muscles, and within minutes, she felt comfortable in the saddle. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, warming the cool morning air. Will led her across his land, pointing out landmarks, explaining the layout of the ranch. He showed her the creek, running clear and cool, where the cattle came to drink. He explained how he rotated the grazing, moving the herd to prevent overgrazing. Victoria listened and watched, fascinated despite herself. There was a rhythm to this life, a connection to the land that she had never experienced in the city. Will talked about the cattle with genuine affection, pointing out individuals by their markings, explaining their personalities. "You really love this," she said as they paused to let the horses drink from the creek. "I do," Will admitted. "It is hard work, and there are bad years when the rain does not come or the prices drop. But this land, this life, it is mine. I built it with my own hands, and no man can take it from me." "Is that important to you?" "Independence, more than anything," Will said, his voice quiet but fierce. "I grew up poor, Victoria, worked other men's land for wages that barely kept us fed. When I came back from the war, I swore I would never be beholden to anyone again. This ranch, it is freedom." Victoria understood that in her bones. "That is why I came here," she said. "I was suffocating back east, trapped by expectations and rules that made no sense. I wanted the chance to build something of my own." Will looked at her with new respect. "Then we are not so different after all." They spent the rest of the morning riding the fence line, and Will taught Victoria how to spot damage, how to make temporary repairs. She worked alongside him, her hands clumsy at first but growing more confident. The work was hard, the sun relentless, but there was a satisfaction in it she had never felt in her previous life. By the time they rode back to the ranch house for lunch, Victoria was exhausted, sunburned, and happier than she had been in years. Over the following weeks, a routine established itself. Victoria rose with the sun, and she and Will worked together through the long Texas days. She learned to ride with confidence, to rope cattle, to read the signs of weather in the sky. Her hands grew calloused, her skin bronzed despite her efforts to wear a hat. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch and talk. Will proved to be better educated than she had expected. He had books, well-worn volumes of Shakespeare and agricultural journals. They discussed everything from cattle breeding to politics, and Victoria found herself looking forward to these conversations as much as the work. One evening, about a month after her arrival, they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Maria Rodriguez had visited that afternoon, bringing vegetables and warm bread, and Victoria had been grateful for the female company. "Maria said the whole county is talking about you," Will said, not unkindly. "The Eastern lady who wears men's clothes and works cattle like a ranch hand." Victoria smiled. "I suppose I've given them plenty to gossip about. Does it bother you, the talk?" "Not as much as I thought it would," Victoria admitted. "Back home I cared desperately what people thought, but here it seems less important somehow." "That is the West for you," Will said. "People are more concerned with whether you can do the work than whether you are following some rule book of proper behavior." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Victoria had grown to appreciate these quiet moments, the easy peace that had developed between them. They were partners now, truly, working the ranch together. But there was something else growing too, something neither of them had acknowledged. She found herself noticing small things about Will. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, which he did more often now. The gentleness of his hands despite their roughness. The sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. And she caught him watching her sometimes, his expression unreadable but intent. "Victoria," Will said suddenly, his voice different, uncertain in a way she had not heard before. "I need to ask you something." She turned to look at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. "What is it? We have been here a month now, working together, living together under the same roof. We are supposed to be married, but we have not even discussed making it official. The minister comes through Brownsville once a month, and he will be there next week." He paused, his jaw working. "I know we agreed this was a practical arrangement, but I need to know, do you want to go through with the marriage, Or would you rather I arrange for passage back east?" Victoria's breath caught. In truth, she had not thought about leaving, not once since arriving. The work was hard, the life isolated, but she felt more herself here than she ever had in Philadelphia. And Will, this quiet, honest man, had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I do not want to go back," she said firmly. "If you are still willing to have me, I would like to make this official." Relief flooded Will's face and something more, something that looked like joy. "I am willing. More than willing. Victoria, I need you to know, this has become more than just a practical arrangement for me. I have come to care for you deeply. I do not want to pressure you, but I wanted you to know." Victoria's heart swelled. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses, the strength. "I care for you too, Will. I did not expect to, but I do." He turned his hand to lace his fingers through hers, and they sat like that as the stars emerged, holding hands and feeling the weight and wonder of what was growing between them. The following week, they rode into Brownsville together. Victoria wore her best dress, carefully pressed, and Will had trimmed his beard and wore a clean shirt. The town was busier than when she had arrived. Folks gathered for the monthly market day and the minister's visit. As they walked toward the small church, Victoria noticed the stares and whispers. She held her head high, her hand on Will's arm. Let them talk. She knew what she wanted now. The minister, a thin man with kind eyes named Reverend Samuel Hayes, greeted them warmly. "Mr. Patterson, I heard you had sent for a bride. This must be the lady." "Victoria Monroe," Will said. "We would like to be married if you have time today." Of course, of course." Reverend Hayes looked around the small church. "Will you want witnesses? I can fetch some of the townspeople." "The Rodriguez family," Will said, "if they are in town." They were, and Maria Rodriguez cried happy tears as she and her husband Manuel stood witness. The ceremony was simple, the words familiar but profound. When Will slipped a simple gold band onto Victoria's finger, her eyes filled with tears. When the minister said, "You may kiss your bride," Will cupped her face gently in his rough hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. Afterward, Maria embraced Victoria warmly. "I am so glad you came," she said in her accented English. "Will is a good man. He deserves happiness." They celebrated with dinner at the hotel, a rare indulgence. Over steak and potatoes, Will reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," Victoria said, and meant it with her whole heart. The ride back to the ranch felt different somehow. Victoria was acutely aware of Will beside her, of the ring on her finger, of what the evening would bring. They had shared a house for weeks, but always with that careful distance. Tonight would be different. Will seemed to sense her nervousness. As they approached the house, he said quietly, "We do not have to rush anything, Victoria. We can take things slow." But Victoria surprised herself. "I do not want to wait," she said. "I want this, Will. I want you." In the privacy of their home, Will kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands gentle but sure as they helped her out of her dress. Victoria had been nervous about this part, had heard horror stories from married friends about their wedding nights. But with Will, it felt natural, right? He was patient and tender, concerned with her comfort and pleasure. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed they would now share, Victoria felt a profound sense of peace. This was where she belonged. This man, this life, this wild, beautiful land. Margaret had been wrong. She would never regret coming here. The months that followed were perhaps the happiest of Victoria's life. She and Will worked the ranch together, true partners in every sense. They faced challenges, a drought that lasted weeks, a sick calf that required round-the-clock care, the constant demands of ranch life. But they faced them together. Victoria grew strong, capable in ways she had never imagined. She could rope and brand cattle, break a horse to saddle, shoot a rifle with reasonable accuracy. But she also kept the house, tended the garden she had planted, made their simple home comfortable. And at night, she and Will would retreat to their bedroom, and there discover each other with growing passion and tenderness. Victoria had never imagined that physical intimacy could be so fulfilling, so joyful. Will made her feel cherished, desired, powerful. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching a thunderstorm roll across the plains, Will said, "I have been thinking about expanding the herd, maybe adding some breeding stock, improving the quality. What do you think?" Victoria smiled. He always asked her opinion now, valued her thoughts. "I think it is a good idea. We would need to improve the south pasture, though, clear some of the scrub." "We could do that over the winter," Will said. "Clear the land, plant better grass." Victoria repeated. "I like the sound of that." Will pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We are a good team, you and me." "The best," Victoria agreed. As the year turned toward fall, Victoria began to notice changes in her body. She was tired more often, queasy in the mornings. She suspected what it might mean but waited to be sure before saying anything to Will. Finally, one evening in October, she could not keep the secret any longer. They were sitting at dinner, and Will was discussing plans for the winter when Victoria interrupted. "Will, I need to tell you something." He looked up, concern immediate in his eyes. "What is wrong? Are you unwell?" "I am not unwell exactly," Victoria said, suddenly nervous. "I am with child." For a long moment Will just stared at her. Then his face transformed, joy spreading across his features like sunrise. He stood so quickly he knocked over his chair, came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "Truly," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor," Victoria said, laughing and crying at once. "Are you happy?" "Happy." Will kissed her deeply, then knelt and pressed his face to her still flat stomach. "I am beyond happy. A child, our child." The pregnancy progressed through the winter months. Will became almost comically protective, insisting Victoria reduce her workload, fretting over her health. Maria Rodriguez visited regularly, bringing advice and baby clothes, sharing stories of her own pregnancies. "Men always worry," Maria said with a knowing smile. "Manuel was the same way. But you are strong, Victoria, you will be fine." In early spring, when the wildflowers were blooming across the prairie and new calves were being born in the pastures, Victoria went into labor. Maria came to help, and Will paced the porch like a caged animal, jumping at every sound. The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Victoria wondered if she had the strength to continue. But she thought of all she had endured to get here, all she had overcome, and she drew on reserves of strength she did not know she possessed. Finally, as dawn broke over the Texas plains, her son came into the world with a healthy cry that brought Will running into the room despite Maria's protests. "You have a son," Victoria said weakly, cradling the tiny, perfect baby against her chest. Will's eyes were wet with tears as he looked at his wife and child. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for everything." They named him Thomas William Patterson, and he became the center of their world. Will was a devoted father, gentle and patient with the infant. Victoria watched her rough cowboy husband rock their son to sleep and sing off key lullabies, and her heart overflowed with love. Thomas was 6 months old when Victoria received a letter from Philadelphia. She recognized Margaret's handwriting and hesitated before opening it. When she finally did, she was surprised by the contents. Her father had died, Margaret wrote. A heart condition, sudden and unexpected. In his final days he had asked about Victoria, had expressed regret for their estrangement. Margaret herself wrote with a different tone than her last letter, less angry, almost wistful. She wondered how Victoria was faring if she had indeed found the happiness she sought. Victoria showed the letter to Will that evening. "I should feel something," she said. "Grief, or vindication, or something. But I just feel distant from it all, like it happened to someone else." "That is because you have a new life now," Will said gently. "That does not mean you are heartless. It just means you have moved forward." Victoria wrote back to Margaret, a kind letter that spoke honestly about her life. She described the ranch, her work, her husband and son. She did not gloat or condemn, but she wanted her sister to know that she had been wrong. Victoria did not regret coming west. It was the best decision she had ever made. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and joy. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's stubborn spirit. When he was 3, Victoria gave birth to a daughter they named Emily Rose, a tiny thing with dark curls and a fierce cry. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Will's gamble on better breeding stock paid off, and their cattle were known for their quality. They added more land, hired hands to help with the work. But Will and Victoria still worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word. One evening, when Thomas was 8 and Emily 5, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. It had become a tradition, this evening ritual, a time to be together and appreciate the beauty of their land. "Tell us the story again," Emily demanded, "about how you and Mama met." Will smiled at Victoria over their daughter's head. "Well, your mama came all the way from Philadelphia on a train. She was the bravest woman I had ever seen, traveling alone to marry a stranger." "And you met her at the station," Thomas prompted. He had heard this story 100 times but never tired of it. "I did. And I thought she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, all prim and proper in her traveling dress. But I was scared too, because I knew ranch life was hard and I did not know if she would stay." "But I did stay," Victoria said, pulling Emily onto her lap. "Because I found something here I had never had before, freedom and purpose and love." "Mama's sister said she would regret coming," Thomas said. "But she did not, right, Mama?" "Not for a single day," Victoria said firmly. "Your father made sure of that." Will reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining in the familiar gesture. "We made sure of it together," he corrected later after the children were asleep. Will and Victoria lay in bed, bodies intertwined in comfortable intimacy. "Do you really mean it?" Will asked quietly. "No regrets." Victoria propped herself up on her elbow, looking down at her husband in the moonlight that streamed through the window. His face was weathered now, lines at the corners of his eyes, silver threading through his dark hair. But he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "Will Patterson, in the 15 years since I stepped off that train, you have given me everything I never knew I wanted. A partnership, a purpose, a family, a home. You have supported my strength instead of trying to break it. You have loved me not despite my stubbornness, but because of it." She leaned down and kissed him softly. "I have no regrets, only gratitude." Will pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. "I love you, Victoria, more than I ever thought possible to love another person." "And I love you," she whispered against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. More years passed, good years mostly, though not without their challenges. There was the year the drought was so bad they lost a third of the herd. The year Emily fell from a horse and broke her arm, giving them all a terrible scare. The year Thomas announced he wanted to go to college in Austin and Victoria, and Will had to learn to let their son forge his own path. But through it all, Victoria and Will faced each challenge together, their bond only growing stronger with time. The ranch continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the county. They added a second story to the house as their family grew, modernized where it made sense but kept the simple heart of the place they had built together. Margaret visited once, when Thomas was 12. She came with her own children, 3 pale city kids who looked lost on the ranch. Victoria was nervous about seeing her sister after so many years, but Margaret surprised her. "You were right, and I was wrong," Margaret said as they sat on the porch, watching Will teach the children to rope a fence post. "You have built a good life here, Victoria, a real life." "I have been comfortable, but I have never been as happy as you look." "It was not easy," Victoria admitted. "The first years were hard. The work was constant, and there were times I was so tired I could barely stand. But it was worth it, Margaret. Every difficult day was worth it." "He loves you," Margaret observed, watching Will laugh at something Thomas said. "Truly loves you. I can see it in the way he looks at you." "And I love him," Victoria said simply. "He is my partner, my best friend, my love. He made sure I never regretted coming here, but the truth is, we did that together." When Thomas did leave for college, it left a hole in the family, but they were proud of him, proud of the intelligent, kind young man he had become. Emily, meanwhile, showed no interest in leaving the ranch. She was her parents' daughter, happiest on horseback with the wind in her hair. "She will take over the ranch someday," Will said one evening, watching Emily work with a young horse in the corral. "She has the feel for it." "She does," Victoria agreed. "Our wild girl." Will pulled Victoria against his side. "Like her mother," Victoria laughed. "I was never wild before I met you." "Yes, you were," Will said with conviction. "You just had not found a place where your wildness could flourish. You came all this way, left everything you knew, traveled into the unknown. That is the wildest, bravest thing I have ever seen." As they grew older, Victoria and Will gradually handed more of the day-to-day ranch operations to Emily and the hands they employed. But they still rode out together most days, still sat on the porch in the evenings, still shared the bedroom where they had first come together as husband and wife. Thomas came home from college with a degree and a fiancée, a smart young woman from Austin who was not afraid of ranch life. They married and settled on a portion of the land, building their own house and starting their own herd. Emily married at 25, a neighboring rancher's son, and they built a house on the far side of the property. Victoria and Will became grandparents, doting on their grandchildren with the special joy that comes from having raised their own children well. The ranch house that had once seemed so empty with just the two of them now rang with the laughter of multiple generations. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Will surprised Victoria with a trip to Brownsville. They stayed at the hotel, much fancier now than it had been in the early days, and attended a dance at the town hall. Victoria wore a dress of deep green silk that Will had ordered specially from San Antonio. She felt almost like a stranger in it, so used was she to her simple ranch clothes. But the way Will looked at her when she emerged from the dressing room made her feel beautiful. "You are stunning," he said, offering his arm. "Shall we show this town how it is done?" They danced under strings of electric lights, a modern marvel that had come to Brownsville just the year before. Will held her close, and Victoria thought back to that nervous young woman who had stepped off the train so many years ago. She barely recognized that frightened girl now. "What are you thinking?" Will asked, feeling her sigh against him. "Just remembering," Victoria said. "The day I arrived, how scared I was, how certain everyone was that I would fail. And instead you succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations," Will said. "You built a life, a family, a legacy. You proved them all wrong, Victoria." "We proved them wrong," she corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you, Will. You gave me the space to be myself, the support to grow. You made sure I never regretted coming, just like you promised." "I never promised that," Will said, confused. "Not in words, maybe," Victoria said, "but in every action, every day. You kept a promise you never made, and I love you for it." As they swayed together on the dance floor, surrounded by their community, Victoria felt a profound sense of contentment. This was her home. These were her people. This life, built from dust and determination and love, was hers. The years continued to unfold. Will and Victoria grew old together, their bodies aging but their love only deepening. They sat on the porch in their rocking chairs, watching the sun set over land they had worked for decades, holding hands with the easy affection of long marriage. Thomas took over the main ranch operations when Will's joints grew too stiff for the daily work. Emily managed the breeding program, her eye for good stock even better than her father's had been. The ranch continued to thrive, now employing dozens of hands and spanning over 10,000 acres. Victoria's hair turned silver, and lines creased her face, but Will still thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. His hair was completely white now, his movements slower, but Victoria still felt a flutter in her heart when he smiled at her. One spring morning, when the wildflowers were blooming and new calves were testing their legs in the pasture, Will did not wake up. Victoria found him peaceful in their bed, a slight smile on his face, gone in his sleep. The grief was crushing, a physical weight on her chest. But Victoria was surrounded by love. Her children and grandchildren gathered around her, held her as she cried, celebrated Will's life with stories and laughter through tears. At his funeral, people came from all over the county. Neighboring ranchers, townspeople, old friends and new. The minister spoke of Will's integrity, his generosity, his devotion to family and land. But it was Victoria who gave the final words. Standing at his grave, her voice strong despite her tears, she said, "Will Patterson was the best man I have ever known. He was honest and kind, strong and gentle, a true partner in every sense of the word. When I came to Texas all those years ago, I was running from a life that did not fit me. Will did not just give me a new life. He gave me the freedom to become who I was always meant to be. He made sure I never regretted my choice, not for a single day, and for that, I will be grateful for the rest of my life." Victoria lived another 5 years after Will's death. She remained on the ranch, still riding out most days despite her children's protests. The land soothed her, reminded her of Will, of the life they had built together. She spent time with her grandchildren, passing on stories of the early days, of building the ranch from nothing, of the love that had sustained her through everything. She taught her granddaughters that they could be strong and capable, that they did not have to fit into any mold society tried to force on them. On her final day, surrounded by her children and grandchildren in the house she and Will had built, Victoria felt at peace. She had lived a full life, a rich life, a life beyond anything she had imagined that day she stepped off the train in Brownsville. "Tell me again about Grandpa," her youngest granddaughter asked, holding Victoria's aged hand. "Your grandpa was a cowboy," Victoria said, her voice weak but content. "A rough, honest Texas cowboy who saw past my fancy Eastern ways to the woman I really was. He loved me, truly loved me, and he gave me the most precious gift anyone can give. He gave me the freedom to be myself." "Did you love him too, Grandma?" "With all my heart," Victoria said. "From that first month on the ranch until this very moment, I have loved him with all my heart." She closed her eyes, and in her mind, she saw it all again. The endless Texas sky, the wildflowers blooming across the prairie, the ranch house standing solid against the wind. And Will, always Will, reaching out his hand to help her down from the wagon, his blue-gray eyes filled with hope and possibility. Margaret had said she would regret coming, but she had been wrong. Victoria had found everything she had ever wanted in the wild Texas landscape. She had found purpose and partnership, freedom and family, and a love that transcended the years and would, she believed, transcend even death. When Victoria Monroe Patterson died peacefully in her sleep that night, she wore a smile on her face and a gold ring on her finger, the same ring Will had placed there over 50 years before. Her children buried her next to Will on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the vast Texas sky they had both loved. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations, a testament to what two people could build when they worked together, loved deeply, and refused to let others define their limits. The story of Victoria and Will became legend in Brownsville, the Eastern lady and the cowboy who proved that love could flourish in the harshest soil, that partnership could overcome any obstacle, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is take a chance on the unknown. And on spring mornings, when the wildflowers bloom across the Texas prairie, when the wind whispers through the grass, and the creek runs clear and cool, some say you can still feel their presence on the land they loved. Not regret, never regret, but joy and contentment and a love that built a legacy lasting far beyond a single lifetime. The Patterson Ranch stands even now, over a century later, still in family hands, still prosperous, still a testament to the courage of a woman who refused to accept the limitations placed on her, and a man who loved her enough to let her flourish. Victoria had been told she would regret coming to Texas. Instead, she found a life beyond her wildest dreams and a love that made sure she never regretted a single moment. That was Will's gift to her, and hers to him, the gift they gave to all who came after them. The gift of living fully, loving deeply, and never, ever regretting the chances taken in the name of freedom and love.